Hello, welcome to DJ Project Breaks Bad, where I'll be talking about the first season of the show. And just a brief apology. I'm using a different setup than I did with the DJ Project Criterion Collections at reviews, and I noticed that the sound quality was not the best. I mean, there's only so much you can do with a tablet computer. So I apologize if the sound quality is not all that great, but at the same time, you're probably used to all kinds of various shades of bad sound through vlog. So again, I apologize for that. Just working with whatever I have. So anyway, I just actually a couple of nights ago I finished the first season, which is a very short season. It's only 7 episodes, which is fairly standard operating procedure when it comes to a television show. You're actually you're given a pilot episode and then 6 episodes by a network to see if the show's a go, and then you just continue on from there. Then it's expanded to 13. That's typically how that's done, and you see that in a lot of television shows. They operate that way. So, anyways, finished the first season, and so far so good. It's a very solid first season, and I could see why, based on that, it would continue on certainly for a second season, and let alone for another 5. Now, something I forgot to mention. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on. Well, first off, when I'm watching these, I'm just focusing on the episodes. I'm not going back, and I'm not going back and listening to commentaries on the episodes that are available. I'm not going back to watch any kind of documentaries. I'm going to try to keep my supplement reading to a minimum, because really this is just about me watching the show for the first time and just kind of seeing what the show itself will say. Maybe somewhere in the far future I'll maybe do a bonus episode where I talk more about where I fill in some of the gaps in some of the productions and everything. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, if I wanted to summarize, it's a very solid first season. It established its premise, it established its characters, it's intriguing, it's compelling, and if I were a network executive working at AMC, I would want a second season too. And if I was an audience member back in 2008, I would definitely want to see more episodes. So, what do I mean by solid first season? Well, actually, I just kind of said what it does. The job of a first season is threefold. One is you need to set up what your premise is, even if you're following a particular convention, whether it be a sitcom or a crime drama or anything of that sort. You need to establish your location. You need to establish your characters. And that will be the basis of which you will build future episodes and story arcs that will last entire seasons and maybe even the entire run of the show, God willing. So it's set up, and then you have to make it compelling for an audience to get them into that world and get them to go along with your characters or to go along with your premise. And then finally, you need to also make it compelling for the network that's helping to pay to make the show, and then be able to broadcast that and they get their money. So that's what a first season should do, and this one does it really well. Now, interestingly, usually with a lot of television shows, and this with some exceptions, the first seasons are often the most derided because it's especially if a show goes on for a really long time, and when you look back at the first season, you notice that the quality is a bit uneven, and a lot of it has to do with just everybody figuring out what it is that they're doing. And, actors breaking into their characters, the writers getting to know their characters and figuring out what kind of storylines they want to do. Everybody just kind of feeling it out. But with this show, I never felt that unevenness. It was very well created by everyone involved. And even though I've noticed a few people in certain key technical positions, I mean, for instance, John Toll, who has worked with, he's worked with Terrence Malick, or maybe I'm thinking John Bailey. I'm sorry. No. He did work with Malick. It was on the Thin Red Line, and he also worked with Mel Gibson on Braveheart, and so a world-class cinematographer. He shot the pilot episode, but then there was I think at a certain point another cinematographer came in to fill in the regular episodes, but there was not a. I didn't notice in first look a significant jump in quality, which means that you have a combination of really dedicated people and then also a really good communication to let everybody. So even if you do have to bring somebody on board, you know exactly what it is that you're going for, and then you'll be able to execute it. So it was a well-constructed machine, and again, I could see why an audience would be really intrigued by this. And there is a lot of good things going for it. You have very compelling characters. You have a very intriguing situation where you have, and in fact, pretty much the pilot episode really does set up everything that's what's gonna. Well, it does and it doesn't, and this is what I kind of like about it. The pilot episode, and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time describing what the episodes are because there are plenty of guides around, and this is really not the point. This is just to kind of give my own impressions and feedback on what I saw out of the show. But the pilot episode pretty much sets up, everything that's going to dictate future episodes. You set up Walter White. You know that he's a very brilliant chemist. In fact, one of the plaques that you see hanging on his wall in his house is awarded for contributions to research that led to the Nobel Prize for chemistry. And so obviously he's very brilliant, but he also has just turned 50. He works as a high school chemistry teacher, and with little to no respect from his students. He also has to work in another job, earning some extra money at a car wash, and so life is kind of humdrum and everything. And then the first seed that is sort of planted in him is he. Well, actually, no. I think he heard about the meth bus over, and his brother-in-law who works as a DEA agent, is kind of bragging about in the middle of his birthday party about this meth bus, and then he noticed that there's a lot of money in selling meth, and so that sort of plants the seed. And then the other seed that's planted is that when he finds out that his chronic coughing is actually an indication that he is in what you'll find out later is stage 3B, I think, of lung cancer, and it's terminal. And so that's the other. So everything is all set up in the first episode, and then it just kind of builds from there. And not only with the character situations, you also establish a bit of the relationships. You have Jesse, who played by Aaron Paul, who had one operation that was busted, and he was sort of a witness to it, and then he now becomes the partner for the second operation with him involved. And the idea being is that he's going to be the brains behind the cooking, and he's going to be the pusher, or getting it out to people. So you establish that relationship, and then it develops from there. So you also establish his family. He has a wife, Skylar, played by Anna Gunn. He has a son, Walt Jr., played by R.J. Mitre, I think that's how you say it. And you find that he has some kind of handicap, disability. It's not explicitly stated so far as I've seen what exactly it is that he has, but he's also, I think, 16 or 17 or so. And so on top of that, he's going through the teenage thing as well. So again, it's all set up in the first season. And but I think something I do want to, now I want to get back to kind of my impressions of it. The thing that I notice is that, yes, everything is in top form, but there are also times where I notice that that it's still a television show, and there's really nothing that you can do about it. Television, pretty much, from the moment it became this popular thing, has had some pretty set formulas about what it can do, depending on what type of show you're doing. If you're doing a sitcom, it's the show is basically you set up a group of characters and a static, a static situation, or a single place that you just mainly stick to, and then you start putting these characters through situations that are humorous, and then it just goes from there. For dramas, it's the same sort of thing, except the tone is dramatic rather than comedic. Of course, this is not to say that you can't have comedy in a drama, and likewise, it doesn't mean you can't have more serious or touching moments in a comedy. In fact, I think the best shows have those, can sometimes switch between the two, even if they do operate on a basic, this is a drama or this is a comedy. In fact, I've noticed that Breaking Bad is very funny in a very, very morbid way, and I'm sure that's very, very intentional. And that's probably the best way to get through some of the moral quandaries. And again, I'm anticipating more moral quandaries as the show progresses. But so far, this has been quite it's been quite amusing, and but also intense, and in the right ways. So yeah, there's only so much you can do with the television format, and again, it works on episodes, so it's all about the single episode, and everything has to work within that hour time slot. But even so, it's still, even with its limitations, it still works, and it still works very well. And one of the ways I think is what makes this work so far, and I don't want to talk about everything because I anticipate there are some things that will probably be brought up in future seasons. But the thing that I noticed right away is there's a very good harmony, actually an excellent harmony, between character and plot. Those are your two components when you are telling a fictional story that has a narrative, and both are equally important. And more often than not, well, for every show that gets this harmony right, there are 10 or more shows, or actually 10 or more things, because I can even include film in this as well. And by the way, I've mentioned before about the cinematographers, but I really get the impression that the people working on it were not just thinking of this as a mere television show, which I think also helps boost the quality of it. If you want to make it more like a cinematic experience, and I've noticed a lot of that, the way the camera works, and particularly in the editing as well. But anyways, excuse me. So yeah, so you need to have that balance. So the best shows, or the best anything, has this balance between character and plot. Now, there are also some exceptions. There are some great films that are entirely plot driven, where everything is all about the plot, and it still works for what it is. And likewise, there are things that are more character driven and with very little plot, and it still works. But if you can have a really good plot and really good characters, and you put them together, uh, you get something really really special. You get something that works as in storytelling, but at the same time, it also has compelling characters that are very real. And likewise, the bad shows are ones. I mean, there's different combinations. There's ones that have very weak characters, or characters that depend purely on just very general tropes, even stereotypes and cliches. And by the way, tropes are not a bad thing. I mean, it's every work of fiction uses tropes. That's just part of the game. What makes a trope, what can make something into a cliche, is when that it's when it the character is, like in the case of characters, the characters are something that is all too familiar and doesn't really add anything to it. Like like an over obsessive father. I mean, you know that character type, but if all he is over obsessive, then there's not really much you can do with it, and it's just not really compelling. Or the carefree mother, same thing. But it's when they go beyond just their shtick or their niche, and the way you do that is you make the characters human. And what do you mean by characters being human? Well, part of it means that they're believable, that they're real people that you could meet on the street, and they would seem very very believable. And I think one of the ways that you can make them believable is in their actions. And this is kind of where the morality issue comes in, which again, I'm anticipating it being more complex over the course of the show. But you have characters that are set up to be, the good guys, but then you start seeing actions that make them feel less than good. For instance, you have, and I think this goes without saying, even though I'm not going to talk about episodes and give summaries, I'm definitely I want to feel free to talk about the show in any way. So just assume that I'm going to give spoilers throughout all of these things. So basically, you shouldn't be watching this if you haven't seen the show anyway. I don't think anything I say is going to make sense. I think the people who really are going to get something out of this are people who have seen the show, or maybe are curious about it and don't mind spoilers. So if you do mind spoilers, you shouldn't be watching any of these episodes. So sorry I didn't say that at the beginning, but now I have. Anyways, so Marie, I forget the actress who plays her, who's married to Hank, the DEA agent, and I forget who plays him. You can kind of tell where I kind of side in all of this. But yeah, Hank's wife Marie, she's, you think that, oh, she's going to be the good, she's going to be kind of the good wife, and she's with a DEA, she's married to a DEA agent, and you think, oh, she can't possibly do anything wrong. Well, you find out pretty much right away that one of her favorite activities is to go into the high-end stores of Albuquerque, and yes, they do exist. I'm very, very sure, even though I've never had the opportunity to go to any of those places. Like I said, I lived in Albuquerque when I was a kid, and that was over 20 years ago. So things have changed, but nevertheless, but she goes into these high-end places where you have the $600 shoes, you have the $1,000 jewelry, and she just very casually, as she's browsing, she just finds ways to take things for herself. This includes a baby shower gift, which becomes a thing. So it's that kind of thing that sort of adds to her character a bit. But yet also, but then there's another scene where this is sort of the attempt at an intervention. This is when Skylar and Hank and Marie and Walt Jr. they're concerned about Walt's erratic behavior, and they also suspect that he'd smoked pot. And it would never ever cross their mind that he's out in an RV cooking meth. But nonetheless, but they're sensing that something is wrong, and this is all in connection with the cancer, and so they try to set up this sort of intervention thing, which is sort of hilarious in a ridiculous and somewhat morbid way, but definitely ridiculous. But Skylar says her piece, and Hank says her piece, and then Marie says her piece that actually that sort of goes against what was said earlier, and then she actually has a really good point. So she's not just the kleptomaniac, or she's not just the other trait about her is that, I mean, part of the reason why she steals all these things is that she's the kind of lady where appearances are everything, and it seems like she wants to make a good impression, or she wants to feel like she's living large or she's living well. So it's all about. I mean, not in a showy way, but I guess that's the other thing. You can take those single traits and you can also exaggerate them to where you can have Marie wearing bling bling all the time, but it's not. It's just very, very subtle. And this is what I mean by effective, compelling characters, and also at the same time effective storytelling. I mean, all these little things, they do help accentuate character, and they also can aid in the plot a bit. These are not just random character moments, and this is the other extreme. If you go to character base, here's the situation. If you go to plot driven, chances are your characters are only there to service the plot. So you have to have this type of character, and then this other type of character to play out this storyline. You have your secondary characters help fill in the plot, to make the plot connections, or to make this event happen. And so therefore the danger is, you may have a story that sequentially will make sense and will have a sound storytelling logic, but the characters are not particularly interesting or compelling because they do what the plot says. Likewise, the extreme of having character-driven items is, you can have very complex characters and even interesting situations, but the situations may not always connect, and it may not have the most even of pacing, where you spend maybe 10 minutes on a situation that may ultimately have nothing to do with the story, and likewise you may have in the next scene where you have some crucial bit of storytelling information, but it's only given 2 minutes. It's just sort of glossed over. So those are the two extremes you can go to and have it be a bad outcome. But this is a case where you have both elements coming together and they work really well. You have compelling characters, but they all work for a plot. And I think what helps is that you have the ticking clock situation. In this case, you have Walt's lung cancer. It's only projected 6 months, maybe a year, even with treatment. And of course, if the treatment is well and in remission, then that's not a problem. But you don't know. And this is something and actually my day job is I work at a pharmaceutical company that actually specializes in oncology. And so this is very, very familiar territory. So I know I have an idea of what's going on in that realm, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So everything just adds to it, and then of course this adds to the character's situations. And then something else that I've noticed is that it's clear that Walt is very brilliant. He's also ignorant, but ignorance can be cured, and he can learn very quickly. And he demonstrates a kind of fluid intelligence. You know, it's not enough just to have a bunch of facts or a bunch of knowledge that's crammed into your head. That certainly helps. But to go a step further is you find yourself in a situation that's unfamiliar or new, and you're able to take in new information. Someone can give you some sort of lay of the land, like Jesse explaining to Walt how meth distribution works and how you know, drug politics work. And you're able to take that in and be able to use whatever information or whatever insight you may have, and then be able to take charge of the situation. And of course, the way that the first season ends, it's a situation where, on the one hand, it seems that Walt and Jesse have things pretty figured out, but they also have an unstable element in their plan, and I anticipate this will complicate their interactions down the line. I mean, again, there's only so much you can do in 7 episodes, but those 7 episodes, I think they set you up. And the other thing I like is that the transformations and everything happen very gradually. It's not all of a sudden that Walt does what he does, or there's even a moment where Walt wants to get out of it. Like he did this one thing, he proved himself that he can do this, and doesn't want to continue. And at a certain point, everything that has happened to him, and also with Jesse, kind of left a bitter taste in their mouth, so to speak. And he doesn't want to go on, and he tries to back away. But then, just when he thought he was out, he gets pulled back in. And but again, it's done in a very, real, compelling way, where it's not, it doesn't depend on stock characters or one-dimensional characters or predictable storylines. And I guess that's the other thing. That's what I was trying to say earlier about working within the confines of a television show, because usually, especially if you've seen enough shows, you kind of know what the patterns are. And you kind of think, oh, this is the moment where this happens. All right, oh, okay, I get where this is going. But sometimes there are little surprises. And even if a scene results in a conclusion, I can't think of a good example right off the top of my head at this moment in relation to Breaking Bad, but there are some, the way it's executed, it may be slightly different, even if the conclusion you may be right about. But the way it's handled and the way it's presented, and again, I think that comes down to the writing. It comes down to the performances, and just how the whole thing is put together. And this is what makes storytelling great. We as a civilization, or actually we as human, and I would even imagine even before civilization, we've been telling stories for a very long time. And there's only so many storylines that are in existence. But the reason why we keep telling stories, well, one, you have new generations, and you have new generations of people, and then you have things changing, you have different situations, and so you have new reasons to tell stories. But we still end up, in the long stretch of history, we end up telling the same sort of stories. But again, what makes it interesting is who's telling the story, and it's all in the details in the end. And so this is a case where the details are definitely working to the show's advantage in telling an interesting story. So yeah, going back to the characters a bit, and maybe I'm talking more about characters because I'm sensitive to that, and I tend to respond more with characters. Although I want to try to talk about the plot a bit, even though there's only so much plot that you can dish out in 7 episodes of a season. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more plot occurring in subsequent seasons. But with the characters, again, with the amount of time that they're given to set up, there's, you get the sense that they're complex characters and that there's some depth to them, even if they do follow, even if there is sort of a basic trope that they're built on. I mean, for instance, Walt, the sort of nerdy, a somewhat nerdy, brainy guy, but then suddenly has this opportunity where he suddenly changes and becomes assertive. It's sort of almost a Jekyll Hyde situation, but it's not done in a, it's, the transformations are done very subtly and very genuinely and almost believable. Actually, no, actually very believable, I should say. Um, Even with the situation of trying to get away with cooking meth and such. But and I've mentioned before about Marie and such. I just want to make sure that a lot of ground is covered. So yeah, I really like this. I really like the um, I really like the writing overall, the performances overall. It's a really again, it's funny, but it's also obviously it's a drama. Uh, it's a crime drama basically, um, but done in a very compelling way. So really, um, if I keep talking, I may just end up reiterating the same point. So I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. But again, I'm talking about a television show, and sometimes there's a lot of ground to cover. So, but anyways, so yeah, looking forward to more. So on to season 2, and until next time, take care.